Hi, it's Jeff here. Before we start our latest pod, just a quick word to remind you of the Harpin Guinness Pint Predictor League and to let you know there's actually a signed copy of the book we're going to be discussing in this pod. So the player who gets the best score in one round. The leader so far is Jack Fogarty with 58, but there's 3 more rounds to go. And you can still also win yourself some free pints from individual matches. So you can enter by first downloading the free Fanzo app, then joining our league. Just enter the code Harpin. That's HARPIN. Right, time to start harping on rugby. Welcome to Harpin on Rugby. My name is Jeff Pagano, and joining me today to discuss his book, which has the perfectly descriptive title of The Book on How You Become a Pro Rugby Player, is mindset and performance coach, Mr. Brian Moylett. Welcome, sir.
Cheers, Jeff. Thanks for having me on.
No problem. Great to have you. So, well, why don't you start by telling us a bit about yourself and how you got to be writing a book like this?
Yeah, so I suppose rolling it back, I grew up in the west of Ireland, Ballina, started playing rugby like anyone else really when I was a young lad, and played underage for Leinster schools with the likes of Jack Cohn and Luke McGrath, captained the Connacht under-20s. Then I moved back home, and that was a pretty good team. Jack Carty, Kieran Marmy and Robbie Henshaw, those guys were on it.
Yeah, that's okay, I suppose.
Yeah, I was lucky to be in a good team. We won the Interpros that year, and yeah, played a bit of underage for Ireland as well. And but the highs and lows, like, I didn't get selected for the 20s World Cup. I was an injury reserve. I was playing for the 19s the year before, so I wasn't one of those players that were guaranteed to be playing every year in the Irish setup. But anyway, then played AIL with Lansdowne, and after winning an All-Ireland League in 2015, I moved across to the States and went there on a rugby scholarship as a player coach. And that was all brilliant and really enjoyed it. I was kind of thinking, I was loving rugby back home. I was kind of thinking, trying to pick up a contract or, break into the pro game. But then, the opportunity to go to the States came about, and I said, hey, I'll try and become an Eagle, because it was 3-year residency rule back then. But then about 6 months in, I was actually playing American football. I walked onto the American football team there, and I fell awkwardly in practice one day. And then on my shoulder, and I'd never had a very serious injury. I'd broken my nose. I had to get that reset with surgery. I had, done little things here and there, rolled ankles, nothing serious. And then this shoulder, I felt a dull pain. And I went over the physio. He said it's probably nothing, ice it. And then the next morning I woke up, it was a bit sore. Kept icing it, kept trying to play through it. And this pain just kept getting worse and worse and worse, to a point then when I was just taking painkillers to get through practice. And it got to a point then, I was playing rugby as well. And it was getting to a point that it felt like when I'd make a tackle that somebody had put a knife through my shoulder. And I just knew that I was like, here, I can't keep trying to strengthen this. There's something really wrong. And went and got an MRI, and I'd torn the labrum. So the cartilage was torn in my shoulder. So waited for 4 months to get a surgery, got a surgery. 5 months after the surgery, one day I was passing a rugby ball with my friend, and I was told that I could get back onto the field. I could do non-contact stuff. And I had gone through like a really challenging 5 months with the rehab. Like, I had never had a big surgery before, and I thought that rehab and return to play was just kind of, you tick some boxes, you do some exercises, it's all good, you get back on the field. But to be honest, it kind of played on me mentally. Like, it was very, very challenging, but nonetheless, I pushed through it. But 5 months later, when I was just getting back onto the field, I passed the ball to my friend, and I just felt a pop in this shoulder again. And I just thought to myself, oh no, this does not feel good. And it just felt like, if you can imagine during the surgery, imagine if they kind of stitched things back together. It had felt like everything had been undone in the shoulder. That's just how it felt. And then I just started to feel down, and then the shoulder got worse and worse and worse. And at that stage, I had signed to play with Chicago, who were meant to be in the MLR. This is 2017. I'd signed with them, and I was meant to be moving up there in 2-3 weeks. And I had been telling them about the return to play, and I was meant to be back in a couple of weeks and whatever. And then all of a sudden, the shoulder was dust. And so then I went up there and, to be honest, fell into a bit of a depression, because I was kind of thinking, what now? Like, what do I do? This shoulder's back to square one. The rugby's going to fall through because I can't play. And this was the plan. And now I've nothing. And so, yeah, I went into a dark place there for a while, and the shoulder got worse and worse again. And it got to a point where I couldn't move my arm. I got a thing called frozen shoulder then, couldn't move my arm. I couldn't run because the impact of like running on the pavement would actually, the vibrations would hurt the shoulder so much. So I could just walk, and I could barely get dressed in the morning. It was challenging. And that just really brought me down. And yeah, so that's when things came to a head. And one day I just said, I need to get back to being myself again. I need to understand the mind. Like, how have I gone from, for 23 or 4 years, being an excited, enthusiastic, driven, ambitious person who is just always going after things and loving life, to now just seeing no hope and not really wanting to be here too much. And so that's when personally, like, I started reading into the mind. I started reading like psychology, philosophy, mindfulness, spirituality, whatever I could read. I was just going from one book to the next and studying these things. And I then got back to being myself again, after 6 months or a year, got back to being myself again. And I wasn't even thinking of playing rugby so much. I wasn't bothered about rugby. I was just bothered about being happy again, essentially. And so I moved to Vancouver, and I was back to being myself. A year or so later, I was back to being myself. And I said, hey, I love rugby. So I went back playing, and the shoulder got right. It was about 18 months from start to finish, but the shoulder, I got it right, and had a great physio. And anyway, they said you can get back on the field. So I went back playing, and I was back playing in Vancouver. And for sure, it's a lower level. It'd probably be like AIL 2A or 2B or something. But I was just ripping it up and playing the best rugby of my life. And like, no fears, no worries, nothing going through my mind that in the past I would have had. And yeah, I still achieve certain things, but my mind definitely held me back. Like, I would have worried about, like, oh, am I good enough? Am I going to get selected? What's the coach going to think? Oh, will I make the next level? Oh, will I get dropped? Will I play well today? All this stuff goes on in your mind. And don't get me wrong, I did lots of things well when I was younger, and there were lots of times, my mind was good and it helped me thrive. But there were other times when it definitely held me back. And I then was in Vancouver, literally just excelling every single game. I was just carving up, and it felt like time had slowed down. And I just went from strength to strength. And then I got picked on the provincial team to play against Canada before the 2019 World Cup. I then, was picked on different representative teams. And then last year was brought into the Canada West setup. So essentially the step before the national team. And I was eligible to play with the national team this May. So, 2 years ago, I kind of reset my goals. I kind of became a bit more serious again about rugby, because it was all just so easy to me. And I was just excelling and thriving out there. And that's when I realized, oh, here, if I knew this when I was 18, 20, 22 years of age, man, things would have been so much different. And so that's when I founded Off Field Rugby, my Instagram. That's why I started off, because I knew that I needed to help players with the mental side of the game. So founded Off Field Rugby, started the Off Field Rugby pod, where I chat with players about their experiences and coaches. And then that's where the idea for the book and how I become a pro rugby player also came about. So I was working with a player one-on-one over Zoom. And, when I work with players one-on-one, it's mostly over Zoom because they're spread around the world. But we were chatting, and I had my books behind me, like, the different random books I was reading. And he said to me, Brian, is there any book you'd recommend for me for my rugby, for the mental side of my rugby? And I said, I just had to think, and I had The Power of Now and all these different books behind me. And I was kind of thinking, what one will I recommend to him? And at that time, I had been writing out a lot of notes, like, to help me with the work I do with players and teams. So like, I'd write down pre-match nerves at the top of the page and just jot down loads of stuff. Or I'd write down moving on from mistakes in games. and I'd write down loads of stuff, because that's a big thing that happens. People make a mistake and they get in their head and they don't want to make another mistake, and then they get in their head for the whole game. So I was writing out all these notes, and then I realized I had 4 chapters written already, and I just said to him, here, let me get back to you on that. And that's when I decided that, yeah, I'm gonna write the book on it, because there's, as I said, there's so much that I learned from studying the mind in my mid-20s, which the byproduct was I started playing so well and started playing the best rugby in my life, which was, I just added the 2 and 2. It was like, oh, I'm learning all this psychology and mindfulness stuff to be my best self off the field, and then actually I'm thriving on the field. So I added the 2 and 2, and then I was like, oh, this is actually how you play your best self, is you get your mindset right.
So it's like you found a way to bottle it almost, the qualities or what you needed to be able to overcome all that.
Exactly. I had literally through my own study and my own practice, because I've been the young lad who's playing underage for whatever teams, provincial, national, whatever, and I've been in those setups. I've been that ambitious player. I've wanted to achieve what nearly every young lad wants to achieve. So I understand what it's like. And then, in my late 20s, when I wasn't even sure if I'd play again, then all of a sudden, it felt like I had cracked the code. It felt like I had unlocked the secret. And I was like, wow, I never knew, to be honest, I never knew you could enjoy your rugby that much and play that well every single game. I thought that it had to be ups and downs. I thought that you had to doubt yourself. I thought that you had to go through lots of times when you have low confidence. I thought that was all part of the journey, but it doesn't have to be. And that's what I found out. And then I was like, man, I need to help, first of all, these younger players, because these younger players, essentially, you love rugby and you play rugby because you love it. But a lot of the time they're going through turmoil. They're going through, like they lose a game and they're beating themselves up in their room. And I've been there. You go home and you're literally beating yourself up and you're just like, I'm useless. I'm no good. I let the team down. And so players go through that. But it doesn't need to be that way, and it shouldn't be that way, So that's why I felt compelled to put it into a book to help players. And the funny thing is I get a lot of the DMs I get into my Instagram off-field rugby is from parents and uncles and the odd auntie and whatever, saying like, oh, I'm getting this for my son, I'm getting this for my nephew, and like, this is what, love what you're saying, the different chapters, and we can chat about them, but it's a lot of, I wrote it for younger players, and I found that the people who listen to the off-field rugby pod, a lot of them are older people or coaches or whatever, because I chat to coaches too, and then they'll say, I listened to your podcast, got the book, but hey, I'm getting it for my son and my nephew and everything. So that's cool that older people are understand that. And I think we all understand the importance of mental health and the importance of that side of things.